So welcome everyone. We are already more than 20 participants and I want to welcome you for this, let's say, second season of the Marie Curie Around the World series. So we started this series last year and we had a huge success and we decided to keep going on. And it's really a pleasure for me to invite Elodie Chabrol today. And she will talk about tips for science communication. And I think she's one of the best person who could actually do it because Elodie obtained, of course, a PhD in neurogenetics in Paris. And she then pursued a research career as a postdoc at UCA, London. And then she got involved in the Pint of Science since 2013. She then decided to create the French branch in 2013. And after these years of working both in research and the Pint of Science simultaneously, she decided to become a full-time science communicator. And now she is the international director for Pint of Science, and she's involved also in various science communication projects as a freelance. I'm sure that many of you know that she's also written a book about science communication that I read, and it was really, really interesting. And I really highly suggest you to go have a look. And so she's passionate about helping scientists share their love of science with the public and communication. And her mission now is to make science accessible to everyone. So for me, it's really a pleasure to have Elodie here. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. And the floor or the screen is yours for your presentation. And for the audience, whenever you will have questions at the end of the talk, you will be able to raise your hands and I will allow you to speak, or you can write everything in the chat. And please be aware to have your phone on your side because I've heard that Elodie has a lot of interaction going on. So you will be required to see QR code and scan them and reply to many questions. So thank you very much for joining and good luck, Elodie. Have a nice talk and talk to you later.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this amazing introduction. Thank you very much. So yes, I'm going to talk about tips for science communication. Like Ruben said, keep your phones handy because yes, I'm going to ask you to scan QR codes to participate. Really, Friday evening, to really not just have me talk for an hour and a half, but also to discuss with you. And the easiest way is with questions and polls. You will see what's happening. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And yes, so, oh, sorry. So yes, as Ruben said, so he said everything amazingly, so I don't have to re-explain my career plan and my career path, sorry. So now I'm freelancer. Most of my science communication experience doesn't come from me doing science communication, then creating something. I actually did things the other way around. I started creating Pint of Science and then I started doing science communication because when it started 10 years ago, science communication wasn't so much a thing that it is now. So the idea was I created it, and then by involved, I realized, oh, I could talk about my science as well. And then after seeing so many Pint of Science talks, I realized, I think I know the tricks now to do good science communication or to do bad science communication, actually. And I started teaching, etc., etc. So everything is based on experience, and basically that's it. If you don't know Pint of Science, I hope you know. If you don't, this is the images that we've taken in Paris in 2018. The concept of it's a festival. The concept of this festival is basically 3 nights, lots of events simultaneously happening in the world, in lots of different cities. At the same 3 nights, researchers going to the pub, talking about their research to the public. So it's really based, it's made like a music festival, you know, lots of things happening at the same time. It's overwhelming to pick where you want to go and what you want to see, but it's exactly made like that. The idea is just to be there 3 days, and it's in multiple places in the world. So we're in 25 countries, and I don't know them by Australia to Costa Rica and everything. So we're really trying to cover not just Europe, but the world and all the different continents. So it's pretty cool, and don't hesitate to join on social media to see what's happening. And picture of very typical Parisian bars. So you see, it's usually pretty relaxed. We're in bars with scientists talking. Every country has different kind of way of doing it. So obviously Greece has like beautiful bars on the beach. We have caves in Paris. Some places have beautiful big garden, but it's basically how it goes. So let's talk about science communication now. And I would like you first, so I will ask you a few times to go to AHA slides. So either you join with the QR code or you type the link. I could put the link in the slides. That would be easier. Let me do it. Up. So please join there, and I'm going to ask you a few questions to start with to ask you your opinion about science communication. So I put it in the discussion. You have the link. Otherwise, I will put a bit longer the QR code for you to join. It's very easy, and wait for me to ask the questions because then you can go from one slide to another. So I'm leaving this QR code 30 more seconds, and I will ask you a few questions. I know it's Friday and you probably just want to be on the weekend, but I thought it would be much nicer to have your opinion than just me talking about, you know, why is science communication important and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Up. So, okay, I see people joining. You still have the QR code. You have if I remove the QR code, you have the code in the chat, the links are in the chat. You can join there. Perfect. And I see you already have started answering some stuff. So there are several levels why science communication is important. You have the very big and important levels about society, and you have also more selfish levels where science communication is important. And I forgot to say, but you found them. You have emojis, so don't hesitate to send like, you know, whatever emoji you want to do whenever I'm talking. So I see this amazing quote, science is not finished until it's communicated. So it is true. Science is funded most of the time by society, by, you know, public fundings and everything. And it's really important to give back to the society what you're doing. So it's important to bring science to citizens. I see lots of things, make citizens aware of what you're doing. And where the taxes go. So exactly, this is what I was talking about just before. You're working for the society as well. So because your job has to be closer to the society you're working for. So yes, raise awareness of the importance of research. Exactly. You know, there is this sentence that always drives me crazy, is that you often hear people saying, oh, you know, the progresses of medicine have made, you know, some disease like cancer treatable, some stuff. And I'm always thinking, you know, behind the progresses of medicine, it's actually the progresses of science. But people always make a difference between medicine and science. So they feel like research is this really big blur thing, and medicine is amazing because now it can cure people, but you have science behind it. So it's the progresses of science that may actually, you know, some that are curable. So it's very important to show the society what's happening in science. So translate knowledge to society, create awareness as well. I see lots of society, yes, improvement of science and society relationship. And I've seen also raise awareness about scientific methods. So it's very important basically to discuss with society for so many reasons. So first, big pay for it, so it's nice to give back. The second is it's important, I'm trying to recap what we've seen, but to talk about scientific methods, because we've seen it with COVID, people don't understand what's inside, it's confusing, but we need to show them not just results, you know, like, oh, we found that, but we need to show them as well how it's been found, you know, like I had the postdoc that lasted 5 years, and all I got out of it was a group it is gene therapy. So it's one graph. It's showing that it works, that it's treating animals and everything. So it was everything I needed it to be. But every time I'm doing a talk, I'm always saying, you see that graph? This is 5 years of my work. And I'm trying to tell people why it's 5 years and why it's okay if it's 5 years and why it takes so long. So it's important as well for them to realize, the length it's taking, the time it's taking, and the money as well, and why we need to test. And sometimes, we hear politics saying, oh, we're putting that many millions in research, and people feel like it's a lot, but sometimes it's not that much. And I think all of that for society is important, because it is a big blur what's happening in research, what's happening in the labs. So it's really important if we are actually opening the doors also for trust, because scientists are super misrepresented in movies, in TV shows. It's getting better, but usually it's someone very nerdy that either is crazy and is going to kill the world, or is going to be like saving the world, but with words no one understands. Scientists are always a bit weird. And you don't necessarily trust them. So it's important that they meet actual scientists and they realize they are like everyone else, and you have so many different scientists. So that was like society thing. You also have role models. It's important to show. I think some people think scientists are only very clever people, or one part of the society, like usually old white males. So it's very interesting to show them the diversity of scientists that exists, and all the different paths. You can be really bad at physics but be amazing at biology. I had half a point out of 20 on physics when I was in uni, but I did a PhD in neuroscience because I didn't need the physics. So I think it's important sometimes to show kids you don't need to be amazing in all the science to actually be a researcher and explain what a researcher does. It's important as well, so to make your science more relevant, to show them what you do, to engage people, charities that are giving, etc., etc. I see share the fun of science. Yes, it is amazing when you share on it, and if you don't done it, like you can put a reaction or say something in the chat. But when you do science communication and you see people that understand what you mean, they feel like it's going to be complicated, and then at one point they're like, oh, I get it now. This is amazing. This is like some kind of drug for me, and it's really cool when you see them like finally realizing they understand what you explain. It's the same for your family. It doesn't have to be public, it could be just your family understanding what you about. So all of that is very important, and you have also some selfish reasons to do science communication. One is that, I don't know if you've realized, but you have more and more grants asking for science communication. So in my time, when I started my first postdoc, I actually applied for a Marie Curie fellowship, and they didn't ask about engagement or dissemination of the research. They were just asking about research. And then 5 years ago, they started asking, how are you going to talk about your research? What is your plan for science communication? And sometimes, when you have to do it, but you don't know how to do it, it can be very stressful. And I think it's going to be the norm more and more to have to do some science and communication. It doesn't have to be you doing it, but on the project. So it could be you and your project, but it could be also when you're involved in big projects, the project has to be communicated to the public. So it's nice if you learn about that. And lastly, the very selfish reason to do science communication that is very, very important, I think, is that it's not just for the public. Science communication is to communicate science to everyone, including your PhD jury, including people that you might be doing an oral to if you want a job in science, maybe your next boss, etc., etc. In science, and I think it's a bad way of doing it, we were thinking either scientists, when we were talking to people, two audiences, scientists or non-scientists. And I think we need to change the way of thinking, because even within scientists, you have people that are absolutely not working on the same things as you do, that don't have the same vocabulary as you do, and are very different ways of thinking. And learn to do science communication, you're going to be a better scientist, and you might get grants, you might get jobs that you wouldn't have had if you are not doing science communication. So at that level, it's also very important, and I'm going to show you how in my talk. So now another question, you can go back to AHA slides if you left. What is your favorite format of science communication, not doing science communication, but that you like to, you know, to listen to go to? Is it podcast? Is it YouTube? Is it live, you know, live events? Is it reading books or reading magazines? What is the thing that you really enjoy the most? It's going to be a word cloud, and you have the slides are going to be available after. I can create a PDF, so you will keep that. So I see YouTube video, yes, lab visits, podcasts, books, podcasts are, oh, games as well. Thank you for putting that. Podcasts are a really big winner of COVID. Elaborate communications, live events, funny presentations, poster. When you think about not necessarily science in like your domain, but like something that has nothing to do with your domain, where would you go to? Oh, Pint of Science, thank you. Really nice. Twitter, social media, video, blog, newsletter. I'm trying to see if there are new different things. Yeah, books, we've seen that. Talks as well. Social media is getting big, so we have like podcast, social media is getting big. I'm happy to see Twitter because I'm going to give you a few tips about Twitter at the end of my talk. TED Talk, very nice. So the idea here is to show you, and I think you can definitely see it from the word cloud, there is no one type of format, and there is no one type of science communication. You have lots of different types that either involve in-person kind of things, social media, you know, big things organized like TED, but also could be very small, like, you know, Twitter operations or small events that are like once a year, or YouTube videos that you could do or appear on some people's YouTube videos. So I'm gonna give you like 30 seconds to finish entering the thing, but it was basically to show you all the different, like the variety of science communication. And I'm gonna show you a few examples just after of all the different stuff that you can do. So let's go to the next slide. Who has done some science communication already? So it's yes or no. So if you have done it once, you can say yes. It's just to know, like, you know, how familiar you are with it. And there is no shame of saying no. It's more for me to know like how new you are to this world. Because I'm going to give tips that I hope even the ones that are doing science communication regularly are going to, you know, get important information from, and also some that if you start doing science communication, it's going to be interesting. Okay, so lots of people have already done it. I haven't had, like, I don't have a slide to know how many times you've done it, but at least you've done it once, I hope. I hope my tips are going to be useful, even if you've done it already. So, thank you for answering. We're going to come back to that slides later. Okay, so I told you, you know, science communication, super big variety. Few years ago, I would say probably like 20 years ago, you didn't have that many different stuff. It was basically either writing a book, writing an article in a magazine, or going on radio or on TV, all that kind of big things. And usually there it wasn't very open for PhD students or postdocs. It was mostly, you know, the experts, so basically senior PIs that were doing that kind of things. And you know, it was based on the deficit model, which is basically thinking that people don't have knowledge and we need to feed them with knowledge. So it's very descending. The idea is like we're feeding them with knowledge because they need to. And in the last 10 years, I would say, we realized in science communication few things. That first, you can learn from the public as well. So sometimes it's not just one way. It's not just scientists giving science. It's also sometimes a dialogue, like with citizen science. And also, there is no general public. And I think if there is one thing you should take from my talk, it's basically that. There is no general public as one thing. There are communities and there are different kinds of public. And if you really want to do good science communication, the best rule is to really analyze your audience and try to know who you are talking to or who you want to talk to, because it's never going to be the same. Even if you get a piece that's going to fit everyone, it's never going to fit everyone. You're going to have to pick some kind of audience, because the way you're going to write is going to go better with one type or another. You know, if you write adults, you write differently for like young adults that you might write for older people, or you might write differently if it's like slightly for students than it is for like people that don't know anything about it. And then even writing, do you want to do a blog? Do you want to do a comic? You know, all that different, those different kind of things. So in the 10 years, you had tons of new initiatives that started to emerge, and I'm showing you a few different ones there. Basically, you have the ones that you can do on your own, which is either writing a blog, being on Twitter, YouTube, you know, starting a podcast, doing TikTok or Twitch. So all those things, you can do it by yourself. And then, so here are like French example, and here are like more international ones. You also have like podcasts, people doing podcasts that usually like to have guests on that are researchers and ask them, have interviews. You also have Pint of Science, 25 countries, so you can definitely do that. Then you have stuff like exhibitions, you know, in the museums and everything. Sometimes they need scientists to help them or to create the exhibitions. You have, so here it's the La Fête de la Science, which is like the the Science Week, but you have also the Brains Week, and I know in some countries you also have that kind of things. And then you have the competition like FAME, where you have to pitch your science in 3 minutes. You have the very French one, is My Thesis in 180 Seconds. It's the same only for PhD students. And you have stuff like Science Comedy Show, which is a stand-up about science. You have some other versions in different countries. There is one thing that is really, really cool that started in France, but is a bit everywhere. It's called Lecturers Without Borders. They realized that scientists are traveling work, and if you could spare an afternoon, for example, to do a lecture in science to, you know, a school or something where you're traveling. Let's say you're going to a country very far away and you have a bit of time, then if you contact them, you can actually give a lecture there. So it's like using the travel of the scientists that they are going to do to go to congresses anyway to actually do in a part of the world that wouldn't have met that kind of scientist. So this is pretty cool as well. You also have more and more games. We've seen it in the World Cloud. You have some others like Dance Your PhD. It's a nature competition. You can record yourself with doing a choreography, sorry, dancing your PhD. You have stuff like Soapbox Science, where women scientists are standing on soapboxes and they explain research in the middle of like the streets and everything for people to listen to. You have stuff like I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here, which is like a chat with a scientist, so with a class. So it is cool because they don't have the video thing. You have Skype a scientist as well with a video, but I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here is cool for two reasons. First, it's a chat, so the kids in the school don't feel really sure about the video and how it's gonna look. They just chat, and also they vote for the best scientist at the end. So, you know, the power is a bit reversed. Instead of like the scientists being almighty, it's actually a competition and the kids can vote for their favorite one. You have Mind the Lab that started in Greece, but is in lots of different countries now. And the idea is to have science in the tube during a few days. And you have two that I'm going to talk to show you how crazy and how diverse science communication can go. you have Science Gaelic and Tactile Universe. So Tactile Universe, it's been created by an astrophysicist that is not seeing well, and he realized that, you know, to discover the galaxies and everything when you are blind or not seeing well, it's super difficult. So he started this initiative where they have actually, if you type Tactile Universe Google, you're gonna have their website, and you can find you know, 3D printing files for you to print, and then people can actually discover the universe. So they are training people to explain, you know, some other people to actually discover galaxies with their touch, and it's amazing. I've done it. You know, they blindfold. Started explaining it and discovering it with the touch is really a deep experience. And it's just to show you how we are really trying to reach people, because, you know, we could think, oh, you're blind, it's astrophysics, too bad, it's not going to happen. But actually some people were like, okay, how can we make some science accessible for some people that could probably not access it otherwise? So I find this initiative really amazing. The other is Science Gaelic. So the Gaelic is a Scottish gathering with music and dance. And the idea was really to think some people won't be interested in science because, you know, it's not in their everyday life. But some stuff like the Gaelic is in their everyday life. So why not enter their, like, by their tradition to actually talk about science? And they do stuff like dances and stuff like that to explain. So you have a picture, explain like neurotransmissions, to also explain math and everything, lots of different things. And it's really cool because it's really to show how sometimes we need to think, okay, how I'm going to reach that kind of community, this community. Okay, by that, so I'm going to try to create something that has their interest at heart, and not just come and be like, how do you want to talk about science? Really try to melt science with tradition. So basically it was lots of things to show you, but I wanted to show you that science communication now became really like sky is the limit. You know, we decided that we need to reach everyone, and you can be as creative as you want. You can either join an initiative that is there, or if you have a great idea of how to reach people that might not be reachable otherwise, you can just decide to do things like that. Now, I want to do communication. Usually, if you don't do it often, or if you haven't done it at all, I think one of the things that is very important is to start by doing something that feels okay. By that, I mean, if you don't like talking in front of a public, if you feel like you love writing more, don't go and do a talk, because sometimes it's already difficult to learn how to do communication and to learn the tricks to communicate your science better. But if on top of that, you're going to put yourself in a stressful situation, you're going to have a bad experience. And if it's the case, the problem is that you're going to think that science communication is not for you, but it's just the thing that you've done that is not for you. For example, I have a friend that did a round table in a room huge room, sorry, full of people. It didn't like it. Was like, science communication is not for me. And I said, no, it's just maybe that way, but if you love writing, maybe you should do that. So I think if you want to really start doing science communication in a very you know, regular way, start by doing something you enjoy. Also, because most of the time, you know, it can be something that you do on top of your work. So it has to feel cool to do it, you know, it has to be something you're actually enjoying and you need to do. You have stuff like writing, like doing events, social media, doing stuff for kids. You also have oral communications. You can sometimes, depending on your project, also do some citizen science. So really think about, what do I enjoy? What would I love to do? And go for that first. When you're super comfortable with your science and the way you talk about it, then you can challenge yourself to do formats that are completely new and that, you know, you don't know what to do, and you're going to learn doing while you do science communication. Sorry. So now this is how to launch your SciComm. So you will see it's not rocket science. If you follow the steps, it's actually easy if you don't forget any steps. So I'm going to detail them just after. But the first one is, as I told you, really analyze your audience, and knowing your audience is one of the best that you could do when you science communication. And actually, if you do that, half of the job is made. Then often, you know, when we're in the lab, I don't know if you've done that, if you're guilty of doing that way. I was definitely guilty of doing that way. Is that when you want to do a talk, you start by gathering the slides that you already have and think, oh, what could I say on those slides? And it's not the right way. Even for a lab meeting, kind of communication, the best way is to think, okay, who are they in front of me? Okay, first step. The second step is, why do I want them to remember? What it is I want to tell them. I'm going to detail a bit later, but think about what you want them to remember when they leave. Then start telling a story. So think about how you're going to bring that story, because sometimes people doing science communication, they just bring data and they're like, yeah, and this happened and this happened and I have that data and it means that. And, you know, it doesn't, even for lab meetings, sometimes it doesn't have, you know, any links in between. You're like, but why did you do that? And what's the link between this thing and this thing? So try to tell a story in the best way, depending obviously on your audience. The fourth one is really try to avoid jargon. And I'm not going to say more because I'm going to say much more just after. Relatable as well. So I'm going to explain more, but like make it close to life, especially if you're doing some science that is very, very far from everyday life. You know, when you're doing medical research, for example, like I was working on epilepsy, and it was kind of easy because it's a very common disease. People have heard of it. When you talk about curing a disease, usually like you don't need to explain it too much. But if you're doing, for example, particle physics, or very like I don't know, working on like humanities on something that is like very abstract, or some kind of like, you know, mind concept or whatever, it's very important to bring it back to real life to explain to people how you're thinking and what's the point. And also don't forget the visuals, and the visuals have to not betray you, and I will explain later, but they have to be your friends. And often we're having slides that are way too full of text or are a bit disturbing for your audience, and instead of actually enjoying your talk, they are going to read your slides. So we're going to talk about that point by point. So know your audience, as I said, it's really the number one rule for everything. When you defend your PhD, it's the number one rule. When you try to get a job in academia, it's your number one rule. And when you do science communication to a general public, it's the number one rule as well. Why are they here? Why do they listen to me? What do they want to get out of it? And what do I want them to remember when home, or when they need to grade my presentation or whatever? And that is the questions that you should ask yourself every time you do some communication to all kinds of publics. Then think about your message. So as I said, usually we do slides first and then message. It's really important to think, once you have your audience locked and you know who you're talking to, you want to know, what do I want them to remember? Okay, so it can be a very long message, it can be a very short one, but it's basically the main idea of my talk. What is it? And then tell a story. So obviously when you're doing your PhD, you're defending your PhD, it might be a slightly different story. When you do science communication, it's really nice to be personal. So usually in the labs, we tell you, you know, in my lab, they were telling me, we don't care about you, we care about the data, which was awful to say. But basically, when you do science communication and you talk to the public, they are super interested in scientists in general. I know for Pint of Science, every time we have talks, they are asking questions about your studies, how it is to work in a lab, etc. So don't hesitate to be personal and explain why you love that subject, you know, or why this part is interesting for you. Because they don't come to get data, they come to get a story, to meet the scientists and to know more. So really don't hesitate to be a bit more personal. As I said, avoid listing discoveries. You know, if you just say, oh, that year that was discovered and that, it just feels like, yeah, I'm reading a Wikipedia page. But why should I listen to you? I could just read Wikipedia. It would be the same. So create a narrative, you know, try to create a story. Sometimes it's the story of the discovery, you know, itself, how it's been made. It could be a story of like you as well, how you started working on that and what you discovered, and then maybe you went on doing a postdoc on something else, you know. And it could be also, I've seen some people going very creative with the narrative, like for example, you know, a PhD student that was working on cancer, and he did his talk. It was a 3-minute talk, but still, like he was the tumor, you know, and explaining this PhD student is trying to reduce me or cure me because I'm a tumor. This is how I grow, and he's trying to kill me with this like CRISPR scissors, blah blah blah. And it was pretty cool. It was a very different way. I also had another speaker in France that is amazing, and is a lot about evolutions, and he loves parasites and everything that is a bit disgusting. And he did a talk the same, yeah, you know, like the worm that can grow in your stomach. And he did a talk as a Tenya to explain like what is his life, what does he like, why does he stay in your stomach, how long does it last, blah blah blah. It was disgusting, but it was really really fun. So don't hesitate to go a bit crazy. You can ask, you know, when you do science communication, you can ask how formal is the thing, because for example, Pint of Science is not formal and we would really enjoy scientists trying to tell crazy stories in different angles, because that's really really fun. Don't hesitate as well, it's a bit like be personal, to show your passion. You know, if there is something that you find incredible and you love, it could be a tiny detail, it could be a tiny story, an anecdote or whatever, show it, explain it, because people are going to be interested. Okay, you just have to show it well, but they're going to be super interested by the person behind the scientist. So now a big bit of it is going to be about jargon. So the difficulty with jargon is that you have jargon that is easy to spot because it's big words, you know, there are not normal words in conversations, and you have jargon that is difficult to spot because it's normal words, it's just that they are used in a way for science that is not meaning the same that in everyday life. Reduction for chemistry, for example, can be a bit like confusing. Models, you know, sometimes can be confusing, so you have to be careful with that and be sure you explain. So jargon, before we used to say, oh, you know, it's okay if you say a jargon word as soon as you explain it. And then actually we realized it's not okay because people feel really weird. So on every slide you have the QR code, that code of the, if you want to get it and keep it in your tabs to read later. I'm going to show you a few papers, so and also an exercise that you can do later. So don't hesitate to scan the QR code and keep it for later. Of course, you cannot read while I talk, but it's, if you want to know more, it's always interesting to go for more. So yes, we realized, okay, jargon is actually bad, and when people read, they feel very knowing a word, so sometimes they completely stop. They shut the reading or the listening, and everything goes bad. So if you can reduce jargon to a minimum, and obviously sometimes you're going to want to explain some words, and you're going to have some words that are going to be jargony because it's going to be what your talk is about. In that case, the best way to explain something with a weird word, with a jargon word, is to explain it and then to give the name, because it's really empowering, because you're going to explain, it's going to be easy to understand, and people are going to be like, oh yeah, I understand. And then you give the word, and then either they want to keep it and they will remember it, or their brain is like, meh, I don't get it. It's okay, I understood the concept. Either way, they are happy because they understood the concept, they feel good, they might not remember the words, but at least you're happy they understood your talk, and they are happy because they understood your talk. If you do the other way around, they might actually get stuck on the word and not listen to you anymore and try to understand and try to make a sense of it, and they will not listen to the explanation. So really, if you have a complicated word, explanation first and then the word. If you're writing, or if you're writing to prepare a talk or writing in general, you have this tool that is amazing. It's called the Diginizer. It's very, very Terminator-ish kind of name. But the idea is like you put a text in that tool, you click on the time periods as well, and then you see with, you have the little colors there, and in red, it's basically what is very jargony. In orange, it's what could be jargony, but not sure, and usually the rest is okay. It's not perfect, okay? I'm not saying it's gonna like see all the words, but sometimes confused and you're not sure about jargon, it can really help you discover some words that could be a bit complicated for people to understand. So it's a very nice tool to use, and yeah, people usually quite like it. Now, so if I had my whole afternoon with you for a workshop, I would make you try to do it. Please, 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 please scan it and keep it. And if you can actually have a bit of fun with like few other like scientists of you or in the lab or whatever, it's quite nice to do not alone, but with people. I will explain why. So the challenge is to try, so this is a text editor, and the challenge is to try to explain your research with the 1,000 most used words in English. So you will feel like it's not many, and it's actually not many, and it's quite complicated, and it's better to do like if you're several people, because usually what I see when I do it in my workshops is that if you do it, you're going to be not convinced and you're going to say, oh, it's not great, it's not precise enough. But when you have people around listening to what you've done and how you explain your research with the editor, they're like, wow, this is so cool. Yeah, it's perfect. I understand everything. So it's better if you're several people, because if you're just on your own, you might be like, nah, it's not precise enough. It's not fun. It's much funnier when you're gathering. To be honest, in 15 minutes, you can do it. So the idea is you type, so you have the link here, you have the QR code, the link is there. You type all the like 1 or 2 paragraphs explaining your thing. It's going to show you if it's not part of the list of the 1,000 words. And yeah, Ruben said in the chat, he tried and it was fun. It is usually really fun, and I love it because people are not convinced it's going to work. And at the end, you see that you can explain your research with the most simple words in English. I'm not saying you're going to do that all the time, because it's very, very, restricted. 1,000 is not many words, but it shows you that it doesn't have to be precise. It doesn't have to have tons of adjectives, jargon, and details to be understood. Okay? It's going to be the basics of your project, but it's still going to be understood, and it's pretty cool to do it. So I hope you're going to do it later. And here is an example of it. Oops, sorry. So here is an example of it. So, rocket science, it's always to say rocket science is difficult. So they decided to actually explain a rocket with the editor to show that, even rocket science can be explained with 1,000 most common words. So you have stuff like lots of fire comes out here, parts that falls off first and everything. And actually, if you read that, you realize, yeah, I get it. It's actually understood. It's easy thing to control which direction the escaping people go. Stuff burned to make the box with the people in it is really fast. It's not with jargon, but you totally get it. So it is pretty cool. And, oh yeah, sorry, I thought I had another slide with the thing, but yeah, so it is super easy to understand. So please try to do it and have fun with it. Another thing that is going to be a bit of food for thought for you, it's that you know, often we think, okay, jargon, you had to avoid it when you talk to the public, but I use jargon when I talk to scientists. But I'm quite sure you've been once, and please raise your hands or tell us in the chat, because actually I cannot see you. So tell us in the chat if that happened to you. Just say yes or it happened. Being in a congress and like, for example, you know, I was a neuroscientist. I would go to the Society for Neuroscience in US and be completely by all the jargon used during the talk. Someone that was doing something that I thought I would understand. So please react in the chat, and I'm gonna keep explaining. Basically, usually people that are doing your project will know all the acronyms, all the jargon, but the more you know, you go further from your domain, people might not know it. So it's not because you talk to scientists that to use tons of jargon, tons of acronyms, and it's also really good to think about how you're going to talk and, you know, what kind of vocabulary you put there. So, you know, before we really thought, okay, jargon for scientists, non-jargon for non-scientists, but this paper showed that actually the papers that are very, very heavy on jargon and acronyms are actually less cited than the papers that are not. So that's why I'm telling you tips I'm giving you. It's not just to have fun, you know, to give cool talks to the public. It's also to be a better scientist, because, you know, when you go to congresses where you're confused and you feel like you don't understand what's happening, you know, okay, so sorry, the chat is not working. But yeah, sometimes you have speakers that are absolutely unbelievably like difficult to understand the jargon they are using. And it's really sad because, you know, you're there, you're scientists, you're trying to understand, and it's not working. Here, the paper showed that when you have too many jargony words, basically it's less cited by other researchers, which is logical, because a paper, you know, if I'm not exactly in the domain and I don't understand it, so yes, obviously I'm not going to put that in my paper. So it's really, really important to think of the jargon you're using, the acronyms, and the tips I'm giving you today. I'm really convinced, because I've done a PhD and have done also a postdoc, and I've seen how it can be, you know, how it can damage sometimes to use too much jargon. So really, it's important for you to keep those tips also for science communication to scientists. So normally for jargon by now you should be super convinced that it is bad to use jargon, and you need to be careful even with scientists. Let's go back now to my little rocket thing. So it was first your audience, second, think about your message. Third, it was, I don't remember what, sorry. Four, it was avoid jargon, and now five, make it relatable. Sorry, it's Friday, I'm a bit tired. Make it relatable. The idea is like to make sure that people have a sense of life and how you can link it to real life. So for example, if you work with crazy small numbers or distances or volumes or stuff that are either very, very small or very, very big, it is nice to bring it back to something. So, you know, a big volume could be the equivalent of like, I don't know, 1,000 Olympic swimming pools. Long distances could be something like Earth to Moon. I know you haven't traveled Earth to Moon, but you see the moon. So if you say it's like the distance compared to 1,000 times the distance, people can realize how big or how far it could be. When you talk about very, very tiny things, for example, I use usually a hair, which we usually say it's like roughly 100 microns. So when you talk about something that is 10 microns, you can say, do you see your hair? Can you imagine it like cutting it 10 times? And then you have the size of that. So people might not have cut a hair, but they will kind of see the thing, because they could even take a hair and look at it, you know, and be like, wow, this is really small. If you find a way to explain your research in a fun and engaging way as well, it's really cool. For example, this researcher was amazing because she was explaining that, you know, DNA is packed in the cells because basically you have 2 meters of DNA to fit each nuclei of a cell, and then she was like, it's basically 13 kilometers of spaghetti in a tennis ball. And that was amazing because it's really, relatable. You're like, yeah, probably most of the people had spaghettis. Most of the people have seen a tennis ball. So they can really relate to that and realize how crazy it is to put 13 kilometers of spaghetti in a tennis ball. So if you can find something like that for your science, it's amazing. And also, you have to change the way you're explaining. You don't have to find a clever tip every time. If you have one that was really, really well, just reuse it all the time, find a cool way of showing it. And this researcher, she found it a few years ago, and now she told me, like, every time she's presenting, she's always talking about that because people really like it. So you don't have to be original at every talk you're doing when you do science communication to the public if you find a cool way to explain your research. I also said be visual, so oh yeah, the number 3 was tell a story, sorry. So 6, be visual. Really, normally when we are doing slides, before I heard in labs that it was 1 slide, 1 minute. I hope it's not what you heard, but it is not good because it's not the time you spend on it, it's more the idea you talk about. Some people are going to talk 1 minute about 3 different ideas. So if they have slides for 3 different ideas, it's not going to be okay. So there is one thing, if you have slides, they need to be as not empty, but not too full as possible. And please have 1 slide, 1 idea. Because if you have stuff that you're not talking about yet on your slide and you're going to talk about in 5 minutes, people read whatever visual they have. So if you have lots of text talking about stuff that you haven't explained yet, they're going to read that and you're going to lose them because they are going to be reading stuff that they don't understand because they didn't listen to you. So it's really showing whatever you're talking about right now. I'm talking about that. This is what's on my slide. I'm switching to a new thing, then the slide is showing a new thing, etc., etc. When you have graphs, please make sure that you explain what they are. So obviously not to scientists, but when you explain, try to be like, this is the time, this is the blah, 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 because I've seen so many scientists just having a slide on a graph on their slides with Greek letters as legends. And they were like, as you see, this is improving really, really well. This is, and then they go to the next thing. And it's like, sorry, what just happened? So you need to explain, this is a graph, we show the days, and then here is the numbers of, for example, for my research would have been the number of seizures per day, and this is the days, and then you can see that, the red thing is with the treatment, the blue thing is without the treatment, so you can see that without the treatment, you keep increasing over the days or whatever, and with the treatment, you have a plateau, you're decreasing. Really take time to explain the graph, to explain what we see and everything. If you have someone that got it from the start, they're going to be like, okay, everything's fine. But if you have people that don't understand what's happening and you play, that they are going to be off your train, and science communication for me is a train, and you get all the people, and what you want is to keep them all on your train and not have everyone falling off the train. And when there is a problem and they need to think, they are gone. So you need to make sure that you explain everything, that everything you have on the slides is understandable, could be also funny. This guy, for example, he was a Ph.D. student and he was talking about physics, and he showed this graph, and that is basically his birthday cake that his labmate made. And he took a picture, and now it's how he's showing his graph for public talks, which was really cool because it was showing that a graph doesn't have to be scary. It can actually be on a birthday cake, and it was kind of a nerdy move and very funny. So actually people in the room, they loved that he showed his birthday cake, and he was like, I'm such a nerd, my friend made a birthday cake with my graph on it. So instead of being scary, the graph became actually a pretty cool thing. I'm not saying you should draw a graph on a birthday cake, but I've seen scientists having graphs on their slide just to make them pretty, the slides pretty. And it's not pretty, especially if you don't explain it. So if you have a graph, take time to explain it. Try to make cool visuals. Don't hesitate to use a lot of pictures and not much text, you know. You don't need to make big sentences on the slides. If you can bring stuff from the lab as well. So the picture at the bottom is a Pint of Science talk on zebrafish, and actually they brought the zebrafish with them. You don't have to bring, you know, animals or whatever from the lab, but even sometimes taking a picture of how your lab is, how you work. I had 2 Pint of Science talk that people really loved. The first one is because a PhD student was talking about her microscope and all the pictures she was doing. It was like high definition, new microscope, whatever. And she, before showing all the cool pictures, she actually showed the picture of the microscope. And I think it was a 2-photon or whatever. So it's like a very huge microscope which takes a room that has like, you know, aircon and everything. And she showed a picture. And I think people sometimes have in mind, you know, the little binocular as a microscope. So when they saw that, like, wow, it's taking up a whole room. And she explained, yes, because, you know, she explained how the microscope was working, which was really cool. And then she explained the differences between old microscopy and new microscopy with images. And she really took time to explain all the images and what we could see. And it was amazing because, you know, they discovered a world that they don't get to see often. They don't get to step in a lab very often. So if you can take pictures or explain how you work in the lab, it's another one came wearing overalls from a P3 lab, you know, like super high security lab. So she started her talk with like all the stuff that she would wear if she was doing some virus work, and then she removed it. But she explained, this is how I'm dressed, and she explained why, and blah, blah, blah. And it was really interesting. So, you know, don't hesitate to really show how you work, not just the data, but like, you have so many interesting stuff in the lab that people haven't seen or don't know how to use, or, you know, even pipettes. Like we did some Pint of Science last May, and they came with pipettes. They explained how it worked. They came with like Eppendorf tubes to show people, you know, just to touch it. It's really cool to touch a tube, to touch that kind of thing. So don't hesitate to bring things that people can touch, they can see, and everything. Okay, it's gonna be a bit your turn to work. So I gave you tips to actually prepare something, but there is a last tip that I would like to give you, but I would like you to realize it's important by answering that question. So what makes a talk captivating? So I'm sure you all had very, very boring talks, and I hope this one is not one of them. What makes a talk captivating versus a boring? You know, have some talks you're like, I could be on Twitter the whole time, and some talks people start to talk and you're like, oh, I want to listen more, I want it to never end. So what do you think is the things that are actually making it captivating? And we can come back to slides. So you have you had the QR code, sorry, the link is there in the chat again. So I can show you the QR code a bit if you want to join. And think about when you've seen a very captivating talk, what made it captivating? What was the element for you that, you know, made the whole difference? So it could be a joke, could be a video, it could be a cartoon, it could be interactive with the public, a surprise, anecdotes, charisma, yes, tell a story, good visuals, free speaking, image, so polls as well. So yes, sometimes when you have interactions, it's pretty cool. Suspense, personal anecdote. So all the stuff, it's really cool. I have some stuff doesn't feel scripted, so this is good as well. Lots of stuff I explain. It's stuff I explain. We see charisma getting like ahead of the rest, and interactive as well. So good visual, anecdotes, engaging with the public, storytelling. So all the stuff I told you, you know, like adding some personal stuff. You can add some anecdotes, definitely. You see the passion. And there's something I didn't talk about and that we can see here is the charisma or the things that are not written, you know, how someone is going to talk, how someone is going to behave on stage as well, you know, doesn't feel scripted, charisma and everything. So this is just to tell you the last tip of that is actually don't forget about the words. About the outside of the words. It's not just about the words. So there's this theory of communication that is very old and it's not probably accurate, but it's still, I'm not saying you should take the percentage like accurately, but it's probably something like that still. So the words are not the things that count the most. Most of the things is body language and tone of voice. That's why it's so hard to give an online talk, because you don't have the body language. So the tone of voice has to make up for a lot of things. And actually, there is this paper, but it's not openly available. But if Nature one day makes an effort, or if you get it on a platform that I won't cite, but you can get this paper that is basically saying that how you move is shaping what people hear. So the way you move is changing how people understand you talk. It's very important to actually not just rehearse the talks, but also rehearse how you move, how you behave on stage and everything. So the nonverbal communication, you have how your face is, how your posture is, you know, how you stand. So the best is to stand as straight as you can, but not like too stiff. And the movements you're doing as well. Are you walking too much around the stage? Are you, you know, in your hands too in a way not controlled? Something like that. So it's very important for you to know, when I talk, what do I do that could be corrected or that I could be actually using to my advantage. And paralinguistic as well is super important. So it's the way you talk. It's, do I breathe enough? Do I make, you know, stops? Do I speak too loud? Do I speak too fast? Do I breathe in between? Whatever. So all those things are super important. And the best is to actually, next time you do a talk, think about how you behave on the talk, how you hold yourself, how you move your hands. And the best is to try to use those movements to your advantage. So when you talk, you try to emphasize with your hands, you know, to be like, this is important. Try to you know, have a nice posture, use your tone of voice as well, way people know it's important or it's not important, you know, like make emphasis with your voice and everything. And this is really important, and that is good for science and so science communication to scientists and science communication in general, because the best you are at dealing with that, you're going to be good as well at dealing with your stress, because if you know you're speaking too fast, you might try to reduce and learn, you know, tricks. What I tell people to try is that if you're not sure about emphasis and how you talk, sometimes it's good to do one crazy rehearsal, just you, because people are going to think you're completely nuts, but you're making it super theatrical, you know, you're making emphasis on everything, you're moving like crazy person and everything, and to just unlock how you move. And then the time after you're going to do your talk, you're going to keep those movements much less, but it's going to be, you know, you're going to be a bit more doing that kind of thing, and emphasis on your voice as well. That is very, very important. So the last thing was, yes, please don't forget that the best way as well to be confident and to be okay with all the body language and everything is to know if there is a way to, for example, if you do a talk in a very, very big room, it works for science congresses and meetings as well. It's nice and go to the room and listen to a talk before and see, how is the microphone? Is it a microphone that is like on my ear? Is it a microphone that I have in my hand? Do I have to have a pointer and a microphone? Do I have to like, you know, sometimes you're standing behind the thing where you can actually, you know, just put your elbows and feel a bit more relaxed? Or is it like you in the middle of the stage with a microphone, and like you have to stand in the middle, and it's a very big screen. Try to know as much as you can to know how to present stuff and how to, you know, how to behave on stage. And you will be less stressed, and it's going to be much nicer body language and everything. Okay, we are going to move now to the last part of my talk, which is about Twitter. And I'm going to start by asking you my last question on AHA slides. Are you using Twitter? And if you're still on AHA slide, normally you have the next question. So, are you using Twitter? So yes, I made two different no's. There is yes, no, and hell no, because yeah, I know some people are very, very against Twitter, and I hope that at least one hell no is gonna maybe move to a normal no, and convince one of the hell no that no, I'm not saying yes, but maybe just a no. This is my goal every time I do a talk about Twitter, because, you know, I get it. Some people might not be interested, so that's why I put it at the end. But please, even if you're not interested, listen, and I hope I'm going to convince you a tiny bit. And at the end, tell me in the chat if I manage to turn you into just a no. That would be really, really cool. I would be happy. That would be like my best way of going for the weekend. So quickly, why do I talk about Twitter and why should you care? Twitter is very nice because you can discover people's work before it's published, or sometimes when it's just been published. You can follow what's happening in your field. You can network or community. It's also a very great way to find out about workshops, fundings, to follow meetings where you're not, because usually they have a special hashtag and people are tweeting about it. So if you have big FOMO and you don't want to miss what's happening in the meeting, you can definitely follow there what's happening and read everything that's been said, or at least what people are tweeting about it. And obviously, you can also share your own work. But one very big argument for using social in general is altmetric. So you can tell me in the chat if you already used it. You can scan the QR code, but altmetric basically so it's going to take you to altmetric, and the idea is like you have a donut with the colors, and it's going to tell you where your article, you put the DOI of the article in a box, and it's going to tell you if it's been published in news outlets, in blogs, in Facebook pages, in whatever and everything. It's basically everything that is not scientific papers. So it's really cool, altmetric, because first, I don't know if you've published some paper, but if you did, you can find out, you can find blogs that actually published your article, or people on Twitter, and you can get data for reports if you have to talk about science communication. If you on at the bottom, you'll see those little donuts, and they all have one common thing, is that they look very, very blue. It's because all the articles that are trending in altmetrics usually are shared a lot on Twitter. So this is also an argument why you should be on Twitter, because you have lots of scientists and lots of articles that actually been shared there. Altmetric, so if you put the DOI of a paper, you arrive normally to that kind of thing, and it's going to show you basically the score and where your paper has been published or talked about. Obviously, if you have, so this is the free version, so you're not going to see all the things, but then you're going to see 5 or 4 of them, and you can see here, for example, the news, so it's giving you 81 news from 78 outlets, the blogs as well. Tweets, you can have the number of tweets, the number of users, and the total number of followers, which is like the addition of all the followers of all the people that about your paper, and also the videos, or everything. Basically, you click on the tabs and you see everything that is happening. So it's an amazing resource to actually be able to do reports without doing anything. You don't have to do anything, and you get some numbers. Now, if you want to talk on Twitter, I'm going to quickly give you some tips because I don't have much time if I want you to ask me questions. But first, I think one of the most important thing is to have a nice bio. Basically, when your bio is how your profile looks. So you need a nice picture. You can put a cover. It doesn't have to be a science one. This is a picture I've taken this winter. So it's not scientist at all. It's not my work. It's just that I found it really cool. And then you have to have usually your name. Be careful, there is the handle, so your Twitter name. Usually when you start announcing something with like a mix of your name and numbers, so try to change it to have something that you actually like. And then make sure you have a bio explaining what you do. So for example, PhD at blah blah blah. Link the institutes you're working on or the grants you're getting. If you're a Marie Curie fellowship, that's really interesting to say that on your bio. To link it, you say @ and then you say the name of the account. Why is it important to link it? Because, for example, I don't know what a servo is and it's not linked. I won't go on Twitter and try to see what it is. But if it's linked, I just have to click on it and I know where you're from. So it's giving information super easily. Also, you can put a link here. So if you don't have any, you can put the LinkedIn one. For example, if you have an updated LinkedIn, it could be your lab page, it could be anything. Obviously, why do you need a good bio profile? It's just because you're more tempted to follow my profile than those two people, even if they publish some really cool things. You don't know who they are, you don't know what they do, you're not even sure if it's someone you met, but that it's that person because there is no picture. We don't know what they talk about. So it's really important to have a good bio to be sure that if someone sees you, they are going to want to follow you because they will know what you want. So this is a tweet. I'm going to go quickly. You can basically do 280 characters. You can add up to 4 images, a GIF. You can do a poll. You have emojis when it's on the computer. And you also have a function that is amazing. That is the scheduler. You can plan your tweets. When you want to talk more than 280 characters, you press on the plus here and it makes a thread. A thread is basically a little box that are all linked together. So if you read this tweet, normally it's going to show the threads and they are going to be all linked together. And this is amazing to talk about papers. So when you want to share articles, you can do a thread. And usually the first tweet is some kind of cover. So you explain quickly what it is. You put the link, you put a nice visual, and this guy is actually the one that made the one ever because, oops, sorry. He basically said a thread explaining what we found. It's a PhD student. He made this visual with the title of the paper, and he said, unless you're a biologist, this title and paper probably doesn't make any sense. So it was a nice hook for people, clearly not understanding that. And then he did the threads and he explained, he made some visual, explaining the DNA, the patterns and everything. So he had 25 tweets to explain the whole paper. And it was a super cool way of doing that. It just did 2 mistakes. So you don't have to put a picture of you, obviously. You don't have to put your face. It's nice to put your name because if, people take screenshots or share it, it's nice if you get the credit for it. And also, he did a very big mistake, is that I forgot to add the link of his paper in the tweet. So the tweet people liked, actually it's much more now because it was such a cool example for doing science communication, but it didn't put the link of the paper, at least at the beginning. So the stats were not as good as it could have been. And also be careful because Twitter likes visuals in landscape, so could have been even looking better, but this was really a cool way and a cool thread to explain things, and definitely got retweeted a lot and people commented a lot on it because it was really a nice way. I'm not saying that you should do that for all the papers that you're sharing, but if you have one paper, and it's like a big paper for you. If you take the time, really, you see it pays off. People are going to like it. It's going to be very nice. And it's a very nice way to do it. You also have another tool that I'm going to quickly explain before I stop and you can ask me questions. So the thread is amazing when you do science communication, and lists are also a super, super cool tool that most of the people don't use. Lists, you can create your own, you can follow people lists. It can be private lists or public lists. And it's a way of using Twitter that either you're more focused, because when you create a list, then you can just the tweets of this list. So let's say, for example, you're interested in science journalism, but also in your, for example, if I was interested in epilepsy, I could have done a general science communication list and a list that just epilepsy. And if I go to my list, I can see the tweets only from the people I added in my list. So I will read tweets that are only on epilepsy, for example, and it makes me much more focused because I don't have all the people I follow, I have just people from list. I also do something, I do private list. Every time I go to a big meeting where I meet lots of people that are on Twitter, I create a list with the name of the meeting and all the people that I met there, because then I can know who I met where in what congress, and it's pretty cool to do that. So to create a list, before you had it there on your menu, but I think now you have to press more and to go to lists. You can do plus, you create a new list, it can be press or not, and you can pin it at the top. And there's an example. So this one, I have the QR code after, but it's the list I created for science communication and engagement initiatives. So if you're interested, you can have a look and follow it. And one thing, if you're on Twitter and you have your phone right now in your hands, you can also go and check the lists you're on, because sometimes you don't know people put you in lists and you don't always, or you most of the time don't get notifications, and sometimes you're in several lists and you never realized. So you go to more lists and then the 3 dots there and lists you're on. If you're on Twitter right now, you can try that and let me know in the chat if you found yourself in lists you didn't know you were in. So yes, sometimes on Twitter you have like one account that is going to be just for fun and for watching, and oh, it's Tommaso. Hi, Tommaso. And sometimes it's good to have another account. You know, if you have one you really want just to share, like cat meme, and another one you really want to be just super professional and be only about science, you can definitely do that. So don't hesitate. You can also sometimes mix a bit of the two, but yeah, do as you want. When you start on Twitter, sometimes it's overwhelming, so the best to do is actually to just watch how people are behaving and see how they do, and, you know, like not necessarily tweet at the beginning, and when you feel okay, you start tweeting yourself. So the lists, to follow one, you have to go on someone's profile, click on the 3 dots. It's not super easy, and then view lists that they have. So if you usually have science communicators, usually they have created. Then you see the list that, for example, Marion created, and then you can, for example, if you click on YouTuber culture, then you see the whole list of the 23 new people. So often people engaged in communication, they have lists, so you can go and you can discover new people there. And especially I've made this one. So I'm really trying to gather all the initiatives that are doing science communication and engagement and science engagement around the world. So I have 263 people in list and counting. Every day I'm adding new stuff. So if you want to follow it, if you want to just have a look to see who on Twitter, it's not personal people, personal accounts, it's initiatives accounts, or like could be podcasts, could be you know, societies, could be lots of different things. And last thing, you can participate on Twitter. So if you're speaking French, you have those accounts. It's accounts that are letting you publish, so weekly accounts. You basically explain your everyday life or your everyday research. So this is the French one. This is the English, English speaking one. So it's real scientist to talk about science. You also have real scientist nano for nanoscience, and you have real scientist DE for the German one. Often you have new accounts popping up. So have a look, and you can email them and say, oh, I would to have the account for a week. Obviously, those ones are international ones, so it might be a bit more complicated. If you speak French, those are really good because it's only French-speaking people, so less people in the world, and also less people queuing for them, and they are usually often looking for scientists wanting to share their everyday lives. The best is to try to find a week where you have exciting experiments, or you're going to Congress or something like that. If you're doing analysis at your computer the whole week, it might be a bit, you might feel like you have less cool stuff to do. So don't forget to think about like the perfect moment you need to do that. If you're on the slides, or if you're on Twitter, you can just send me a little message and I will send you to have more details about Twitter. I can send you this infographic that I made with like 10 tips to use Twitter like a pro. As Ruben said, there is the SciComm guide. So this is 100 pages of science communication. It's completely free. It's made in 2 different parts. The first one is what is science communication? The second part is how to, so basically articles to help you do science communication. And the last part are interviews of people doing science communication. And yes, thanks for coming back. I'm done if you have questions.
Well, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. And I'm glad to communicate to you that you converted Tommaso to Twitter, I think, officially. So your weekend is safe. And of course, now, if you have question, I think you can raise your hand and you can talk, or you can drop your question in the chat, and I will, of course, report to her the question. We still have like 8 minutes to go, so feel free.
Hope it wasn't too much, but yeah, I've tried to give you as many tips and food for thoughts as possible for you to, I wanted to plant little seeds in your brain for you to think about later. And oh, you just opened your science Twitter.
And it's true.
Yes, I'm gonna have the best weekend ever. Thank you. Amazing. So yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate.
So I will kick off with one question, which is not related to science communication, but more on the experience. So we saw that you started then with the Pint of Science, and when you move into science communication. So I'm as well a researcher when I moved to science communication medcoms. So the question that maybe also could be interesting for everyone is like, what were your feelings when switching from academia to science communication? Were you worried about failing in science communication? Did you have doubts, or am I doing the right thing or not? Or this will be my current way to go? So yeah, just.
Yes. So I left research, and I had experience for 5 years in science communication, so it wasn't nothing, but I had the imposter syndrome like big time, because I think when you do research, you have a doctorate, you have a PhD, so you feel like, yeah, I know things because I've done a PhD. And then I was teaching science communication, and I was like, I don't have a diploma for that. Why would people listen to my advice, And until one day, I think the big moment where I realized I'm actually good at that and I enjoy that was when I was jury for for the competition, my thesis in 180 seconds. I was jury for the semifinals, and the second day was actually the feedback day. So the first day I watched 56 people doing their pitch, and the day after they came for feedback. And I realized, even if I had only minutes to listen to them, it was overwhelming, and I didn't have much time to think how I would have done it on the spot. When I talked to them, I felt like I really helped them. And I think since that, I was like, I can actually do trainings because I understand the science. I think I realized what my good, skill was. I was like, this is definitely my skill. And I've seen so many talks that I could do it, and I realized, okay, I'm definitely okay to do that now, and it's gone. But I love to challenge myself. I started a podcast a year and a half ago. I didn't know how to do podcast at all, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. I don't know how to do it, and I'm always a bit feeling like, okay, now I'm teaching also how to do a podcast. And at the beginning I was like, yeah, it's a bit weird, I'm teaching that even if I didn't know about it. But I realized that, and I think it's a very important stuff, that experience sometimes is more important than a diploma. Because when you have an experience on something, and someone that just comes out of a school doesn't necessarily know as much as you that have seen like tons of stuff, so it can be a bit difficult. But I think the best, if you try before, if you have a nice network, if you've done some stuff and you have experience, then it's gonna go away. But I think it depends also on the personality. And I had a big imposter syndrome, but it was also a motor for me, like it was pushing me to do better as well. So it wasn't like I wasn't paralyzed by the fear of like failing. It was more like I need to be sure I do actually good. So but yeah, it was, for me it was a smooth transition, because for 4 years and for almost 5 years I was working as a postdoc, and then by night I was doing science communication. So I basically felt when I left research that I only left like part of it, and it wasn't so complicated or so difficult for me to go from one to another, because I was already in the other one for like a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with your point like that. I also had a sort of smooth transition, so it definitely makes life easier, and I think that's also helpful for building the career. And thank you, Jax, for your message. Yeah, it's cool that we can always share your if you have Twitter, you can put in the chat, and I think everyone can see it and adjust. And otherwise, you can also drop an email to communication@working Marie Curie alumni, and so then I will also make sure that we follow each other. You can follow the Marie Curie. I have also a private account, so yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, I think it's nice if all the people out there, are dropping their Twitter link. I've put mine, so don't hesitate. And yeah, if you have other question, it's almost 6:30. Thank you for staying until the end.
Do you have one last question from the audience? Don't be shy.
I think they are all busy getting their Twitter.
Tired, yeah.
Yeah, and tired as
Twitter,
well.
yeah. Tired, setting up Twitter and ready for the weekend.
Yes.
So, good question.
Ooh, my next project. How do I? So quickly, how do I fund Pint of Science? I have Tactile Universe in France, and I also have sponsors. And this is how we do. Thank you, Jackson. And my next project, it's really difficult because I do lots of different things. So I'm doing podcasts for clients now, and I think I love teaching. Like I'm exhausted right now, but giving talks like that and doing giving workshops and talking to people and feeling like someone created their Twitter account, or maybe the tips are going to be helpful to gives me so much energy that I think I'm going to continue doing trainings. And actually I get lots of people asking me to do training, so this is the thing I'm going to continue, because it's giving me a lot of energy, even if sometimes I'm like, I'm so exhausted, how will I be managing to do that? I leave that, I'm like, yeah, it was amazing. So follow your heart as well when you do science communication. And that's why I was saying, do something that you like, because sometimes you're at work, everything is so much, the world is so much at the moment, that if you don't do something that you will enjoy, there is no point. So really try to find within yourself, what kind of things you enjoy, and try to do that. It could be podcast, it could be writing, anything, but don't force yourself to do something you won't enjoy, because it has to be nice and enjoyable and cool.
That was perfect. So we are well in time. So I want to thank you for the great talk and the great tips that you have done today. I'm sure that all the people will definitely make use of them. I saw already many people on Twitter already, so that was really fun. And I want to thank all the participants for sticking up with us until 6:30 European time. And it was nice to have you. And you will find, if you miss something or you simply watch to rewatch or have a nice thing on YouTube, I will try to upload it as soon as possible. And we will try to write a blog post as well as a summary. And so thank you all. Thank you, Elodie. It was great.
Thank
and
you.
Wishing you all a nice evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.